Hi, it's Rabbi Rona with your weekly Torah message in times of Corona. This Shabbat tomorrow we'll be reading Parshiot Acharei and Kedoshim, which are normally read together, except in certain years where we have a leap year and we need more Torah portions. They're thematically linked by the holiness code and the sexual conduct code that's included in them. But what I want to talk about is three distinct verses. The first we find is Leviticus 18:5, which said, "These are the things that you should do to live by them." And Rashi says, "Live by them and not die by them." And then Ramban in the Mikra Gedolot, the commentary on Torah, says, "Pikuach nefesh doche et Shabbat v'kol mitzvot." That saving a life transcends the Sabbath and all other Torah commandments. And Rambam, Maimonides, also says this in his code. This is a very important principle in Jewish law, that we have to save lives. And this takes precedence over other things. So, for instance, you may be aware that when somebody is on life support, according to traditional halacha, you can't disconnect them from life support. However, if we know that they aren't going to recover, there have been medical authorities that said that you could do passive things like allowing their IV bag to run dry if they have determined that the IV is artificially keeping them alive, and then it becomes the status of the wood chopper as discussed in Talmud. In chapter 19 of Leviticus, there are two additional statements. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, the command v'ahavta appears in Torah two other times. V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. You shall love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your heart, and with all your might. And v'ahavta et hager ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You shall love the stranger because you are strangers in the land of Egypt. The next one is v'lifnei iver lo titein mechshol. And you shall not place a stumbling block before the blind. Now, this is not limited to simply blind people. And this is not limited to physically a stumbling block. This really means that you should not do something that causes any kind of an obstruction to a disadvantaged person. When we take these three prohibitions, saving a life takes precedence. Loving your neighbor as yourself and recognizing that you are prohibited from obstructing somebody who is disadvantaged from surviving, we see that the way that traditional orthodoxy in Judaism and in other religions deals with LGBT people and other marginalized peoples is very troubling. And I've written about this in a number of things which I've published. You're required to allow people to live. You're required to not put obstructions in front of their life. Yet, conversion therapy is forced on people. That's an obstruction to living. There's tons and tons of research that shows that conversion therapy is not effective. And in fact, the National Transgender Discrimination Survey clearly shows, as does other sociological research, that preventing a transgender person from living their actual identity is at great risk to their life. That's why transgender people attempt suicide at a rate 9 times that of the general population. Not because transgender people are mentally ill, but because transgender people face so much external oppression, which is prohibited by Torah, yet Orthodox rabbis routinely do this. In fact, I've had to block a rabbi who used to be my teacher for doing this, even though it's prohibited by halacha. When we're dealing with the COVID-19, the coronavirus crisis, we come across the same kind of thing. We see hospitals around the globe and in the United States making this kind of very cynical calculus. If we have two patients and one of them was otherwise healthy and younger and had no other issues other than the fact that they're sick with the virus, and we have another patient who's disabled or elderly or chronically ill, they're going to make the decision that the younger, otherwise healthy patient gets treated and the older or disabled person, if there's limited resources, may not get treated. They're going to sacrifice the older, the sicker, to save the younger and healthier. By Torah law, by halacha, this is not allowed, yet it is going on. We saw on Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day, people walking around with signs, sacrifice the weak to save the strong. And this has to stop. This is disgusting that this is happening in our country, the United States. This is not what our country stands for. This virus, this plague, is showing the true nature of far too many people in our country. And it's very scary and it's very disappointing. Since last December, many of you know that I've been going out carrying a weapon because of the huge threats against the transgender community and against the Jewish community, of which I'm part of both. Things like what's going on today doesn't make me feel much safer, that's for sure. I feel more at risk now than I ever have before, even though no one has directly thrown threats at me or anyone else that I know. Right now, the biggest threat, of course, is something we can't even see. But nonetheless, we have these people who are so selfish and so self-centered and so narcissistic and so sociopathic that they're saying this kind of stuff. And these are people who live in the so-called Bible Belt and are so-called Christians, at least according to them. And they're supposed to know what the greatest commandment in their Bible is, where Jesus said, first love God with all your heart, your soul, and your might. Sound familiar? Yeah, I think so. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Also sound familiar? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so Jesus got that statement in Matthew from our Torah. Of course he did. He was a rabbi too, or trained as one. He didn't have the title rabbi. That didn't exist yet. But the point is, we all have these teachings. We all know these teachings. This is how we're supposed to comport ourselves. And if more people who claim to follow these religions would actually follow them instead of cherry picking certain other mitzvot, certain other commandments that are in this parsha, like Leviticus 18:22, about homosexual sex. And by the way, that verse is very complicated. It is not clear and unambiguous the way Orthodox rabbis say it is. Look at my website, rabbarona.us. You can read about it on the gender and Bible workshops. You'll see it's a very complicated verse. It's not simple like they say, and therefore we don't really know what this verse means. So we can't make blanket statements about what it's prohibiting. We weren't there when Torah was given. What we can know for sure is, because there are so many ways to disprove the classical interpretation, this verse is clearly not stam, as it's written, a prohibition against private sex between two men. It has to mean something else. So don't go attacking gay men or other people just because they live in a different way than you do. Remember, our Pasha commands, love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't want people attacking you for how you live, don't attack somebody else for how they live. Our Parsha commands, don't put a stumbling block before the blind. Don't create obstacles for marginalized people. Our Parsha commands, we are commanded to live. So let's go out there and live. Shabbat Shalom, U'Mevorach, a peaceful and blessed Sabbath.